As Anarchy takes over Sri Lanka, more video footages have now emerged of the Sri Lanka security forces brutally attacking protesters. This moments before the protesters entered the presidential palace yesterday. On your screens, viewers, another such visual that has been accessed on social media, and you can see how forces are attacking the protesters there. Now, we did see how anarchy could be witnessed across Lanka. Power corridors were breached. The president is in hiding and he's been facing a lot of anger. He's sought 72 hours to resign, and details that continue to come in of the kind of political crisis that has now spilled onto streets across in Sri Lanka. Let me go across to King Ratnam, who's joining us live from Colombo. Another visual that has been picked up from social media, Ratnam, making it very clear that this is how the protesters were treated by the security forces. Remember, they also faced tear gas shells, etc. yesterday when they stormed the presidential palace. But what's going on currently?
Yes, so like you rightly said, the forces behaved quite brutally against the peaceful protesters. Yes, they were trying to enter premises, but they were unarmed. And they were quite innocent in that sense, and the forces still used brutal force on them, and we have evidently seen that, and that triggered a lot of anger, that triggered a lot of chaos. I think standing right in front of a very important symbol at the protest center. This is a giant super trampling gas canister, and this was created a month ago, but this got down and people standing up fearlessly against this brutal force and still giving their demand.
All right, continue talking to us. It's very important to point out the current situation to our viewers. Now, the president has said that he will step down on the 13th. He's still untraceable. No one knows of his whereabouts. But what's the kind of political atmosphere there? Because there is mounting pressure by these protesters. They've refused to withdraw from the streets, some of whom have stayed the entire night at the presidential palace for that matter.
Yes, so the present situation is that the crowd is building up at the headquarters of the protest, which is the Lanka Gotabaya situated at Golfers. We saw millions of people gather here yesterday, and this is where it all began, and this is all where it ended. Yes, the president is not to be seen. He's gone missing. We don't know whether he has left the country in his private jet. There are stories, many stories that are going around. We really don't know where he is. But he has announced to the speaker that he is stepping down, and the speaker came out and said this personally by himself. But what we know now is that the party leaders of the parliament have gathered, and they are trying to make a decision about the prime minister and the way forward. But the mood at the protesting center is that people are now gathering in slowly. I think it will build up towards the evening, and again it will build up to a crescendo where they will demand for immediate action.
Yes, absolutely. You know, the situation is something that could be seen play out in this fashion, Ratnam, because these are protests that have been going on for months altogether. People on ground, the common man in Sri Lanka has been voicing their opinion against the economic crisis that has hit the country. No one took charge, took accountability of what's been happening, and this is how it's played out across the country today.
Yes, so this is there are slogans here that this is a 74-year-old problem, and politicians have been slowly robbing us, especially with the executive presidency in place. There is absolute power. The president is not under law, and that has created this draconian system where the people are trampled, and this has now come to the crescendo with the Rajapaksa saying crazy and really looting this country of its everything that's being robbed from the people, including their future. So I think it just came to a point of no return, and that is why the yesterday protest was called the end game, and it was end to the system that existed, and we are looking at a foundation that is being built for a future, for a better future.
Yes, but how is it, Ratnam, that mobilization of thousands took place on one single day all of a sudden? What really transpired behind these protests, and what is the plan for the day? Are the protesters going to be, laying siege to the presidential palace? Yesterday they'd set the Prime Minister's residence also on fire. What is their plan for the day? Any word on that?
Well, the threat is, the protesters are threatening that if they are not, their demands are not met, that they will proceed to occupy or try to occupy many other important places like the parliament itself, because they are sick and tired of waiting. So there was an announcement, in fact a press conference, in which they announced that we will move and occupy the parliament if you don't meet our demands. So that is how desperate the protesters are. So the answers need to come, and the answers need to come quickly. And that's the mood. Yes, you asked about how these millions of people came together. It's just I think there was nothing beyond social media posts, and people just came with all the obstacles. There were no buses yesterday. There were no vehicles on the road yesterday. It was, even the protesters had only estimated 10,000 people to arrive here. But we had officially, now we know that there were 650,000 people. Some official reports are saying 800,000 people arrived in Colombo just on the part of come together to get this done.
All right, so Lankan President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, in all likelihood, is set to resign on the 13th of July. The Prime Minister has also said that he's willing to step down. That's an announcement that has been confirmed. Ratnam, has all that not cut any ice with the protesters? What is it that they're demanding at the moment?
Yeah, so there is absolute disgust, because of what has happened with politicians in the past. People don't want to believe anything they say. So until these things actually take place, I think people will just be resilient and continue to be demanding. And that seems to be the mood, and they don't want to give up and just go back and say this is going to happen. Because, for example, now yesterday there were announcements of the PM, Prime Minister resigning. But today we are hearing he hasn't resigned. Today we are also hearing that he's waiting for the party leaders to tell him to leave. So these are developments that the people obviously are doubtful about, and they don't want to trust things that it's
So they're not willing to take anything on face value as it appears at the moment. Ratnam, what next for Sri Lanka? This is a big crisis that the country is witnessing. After the resignation of the two top men, an all-party government is likely to be established, and that's going to take some time. So how is it going to play out the next few days?
Yes, I think what's next for Sri Lanka depends on the decisions that come out immediately. I think even the international, the people believe that the international community is waiting for the Rajapaksas to leave, for them to step in and help Sri Lanka, build Sri Lanka out of this crisis, which is also going to be a long marathon. I don't think people expect this change overnight. They are willing to suffer, they are willing to take the pain as long as they see a direction of change and real change in this country. And I think they are really hopeful that somebody will step in after the Rajapaksas have gone to bail them out and this look at this crisis of that is beyond us.
Yes, because the last few months we've seen that one demand from all of these protesters who repeatedly hit the streets. They kept raising Gota, go home slogans. The slogans kept growing louder by the day. They called for the resignation of the president. But are they going to be content with the president's ouster itself? Is that the one long-standing demand? Stay on with us.
And it's time that we got all our stolen money back to this country. And also the air conditions are running in that presidential palace while people don't have electricity in their homes.
So the crisis goes much beyond just the resignation, the demand for the resignation of the president. Remember, this is a country that has seen months of anti-government protests in the wake of economic crisis, of course. In fact, the Prime Minister, like we've been saying, has also said that he's willing to resign to make way for an all-party government. And Ratnam continues to stay on with us. Yes, Ratnam, that's what I was meaning to ask you. Given that there is a big economic crisis, that the country has been hit by, it's going to take more than just the resignation of the president to make things, to settle things in the near future.
Yeah, so I think that was during the protest over these months, there was also a call for the 225 parliamentary members to get out of parliament, and that's what that is saying is that people are now sick and tired of the system that exists in this country with regards to the constitution, the executive presidency, the issues with the minority. So all of this has now surfaced, and all of this has to be dealt with at the same time. Yes, the economic crisis is the number one question in place, but I think the mood and the resilience of Sri Lankans is to be that this suffering has now become the new normal, and they are just trusted to that life. There is no option otherwise. So the main thing is to make sure that the system on the top changes, and those changes have to be serious, have to be very quick. And yes, Sri Lanka needs an international presence to bail them out of this crisis.
Yes, the army chief has also sought public support to maintain peace, and a peaceful solution is something that everyone is looking at the moment. Ratnam, thank you for joining us. We'll keep coming back to you through the day. This remains one of our top stories here on Times Now. But after Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, remember viewers, yesterday announced that he will step down, angry protesters stormed into his residence and set it on fire. Here's what happened. We also talk about how in a dramatic video, before we tell you about what happened at the Prime Minister's residence, a dramatic video that surfaced, we see a protester who waited inside the President's house. He can be seen enjoying the perks there. Now remember, several of those protesters have stayed the night also at the Presidential Palace. Here are some of those scenes.
Mr. President, thank you. I'm sleeping in your bed. Very comfortable. Mr. President, thank you. I'm sleeping in your bed. Very comfortable.
Now, while all this is happening, the next big question is what next in Sri Lanka, given the kind of crisis that the country has been hit by. If we talk about the Prime Minister, he's resigned. Wickremesinghe has already stepped down as the Prime Minister. Now, what's likely to happen next is that an all-party government will be established. That's, of course, going to take some time because the all-party government will have to prove majority. Those are some of the near future expectations as far as the forming of the next government is concerned. The Speaker, meanwhile, is likely to be appointed as the acting president. The president has already said, remember, that he's likely to step down by the 13th of July. Furthermore, an all-party consensus is needed on a clean prime minister. Long-standing demand of the protesters who've been taking to streets repeatedly month after month. The Speaker will also then summon the Parliament for economic reform, something that the protesters, the common man in the country, has been demanding given the crisis, the economic crisis that the country is now staring at. Fresh elections thereafter will have to be held. So we will look at a fresh election scenario sooner or later in Sri Lanka. Those are some of the developments we're expecting in the near future as both the President and the Prime Minister will step down. The confirmation that has come in already, the Prime Minister said that given the current situation, he is willing to step down. Here in India as well, we've seen the Congress resort to politics yet again as far as the Lankan crisis is concerned. First up, some reactions.
The protesters want change. They want the dictatorial presidential system to end. and they want clean government, corruption-free government, and so forth. So that will be the way forward. So, but the immediate issue is economic issue. So the economic issue is that Sri Lanka has not been able to service its debt, and that has to be addressed. And that is why building an all-party consensus will be important in taking those quick decisions. We will also need the help of all our friends and the friendly countries around, particularly because people are on the streets because they don't have things like oil, you see. And I think to reduce the tension, we will need to do that. The real challenge is going to come on debt restructuring.
So that's a reaction by Sri Lankan MP on the current situation and the crisis there in Sri Lanka. India also very closely monitoring the situation, given that it's our neighbouring nation. A lot of reactions coming in. Ratnam has non-stop reported for us on the current situation on ground. Here's another report filed by him.
This morning, as you can see behind me, this is the old Parliament building adjoining the President's Secretariat facility, and that's been occupied now by the protesters, and they have now decided to move the makeshift library that was there at the Gotabaya, which is the heart of the protest area. They have decided to move the library into these premises and secure it as long as it needs to be secured until the demands are met. And right from the start, this protest has been a very peaceful, very innocent, and also very creative. And I'm just going to show you one example of that. I'm just going to turn the camera here. As you can see, there is an old leader here, parliamentarian, and they have all been masked. And that's the case with all the statues that are outside here. So this has definitely been a very creative protest right from the start, and that is why the violence behind the so-called protesters is very doubtful, and we and the people and the protesters doubt very much that there is a political force that wants to undermine the protest and make it look like it's violent. But we have witnessed that this has been a very peaceful protest for the now more than 90 days and nearing 100 days.
What's also shocking in all of this that the Congress here in India has drawn a link between what's happening there to the situation in India currently. We get you more reactions on that. First up, a short break. Be back with more on the other side.